Sit down, right there, don't go nowhere, little baby gon' shake that, little baby gon' shake that, little baby gon' shake that, little baby gon' shake that. Said, yeah, I like that, bring that right here. Said, sit down, right there, don't go nowhere. Said, yeah, I like that, bring that right here. Said, sit down, right there, don't go nowhere.
Welcome back. We back with another reaction video. Today we reacting to Swamp Stories. Alabama's dumbest demon. He smoked his best friend and his cousin, and now his family wants him gone. Now, y'all didn't get to see the thumbnail, but he's talking about Honeykomb Brazy. Let's see why he's Alabama's dumbest demon. It's a rapper. What's the song? His breakout song. It's a freestyle, like a first day out type freestyle. That's like one of his biggest songs ever. That's how I found out about him. He can rap. He raps pretty good. Let's get into it.
And so you pretty much immune to getting in like that shit didn't really phase you. You didn't think about
it. You in big trouble. Boy, your in big trouble. You know you in big trouble. You so I can't come to the city, you know you're in big trouble on big dog. Yeah. And I'm gonna keep my spirit for real. Don't play with me on really like that. Don't play with me on really like that.
Welcome back to another episode of Swamp Stories. For this one, we dive into one of the craziest ones I've ever covered. I know I say it before every video, but this one is actually beyond comprehension. From family betrayal, friends crossing friends, rap beef, and so much more. We follow the entire life story of easily hip-hop's biggest goon. And I promise you everything in this video will absolutely blow your mind. This one is Brazy, but before we get into it, let me run the intro. The story begins in Mobile, Alabama, a place you've probably never heard of and have definitely never been to. But despite it being relatively unknown, it's actually a very historical city that should be taught in schools. And for that reason, we start off with some much needed and very important history. For those who are unfamiliar, the Atlantic slave trade was made illegal in 1808 by the United States government. This meant that slaves could no longer be imported to the country, a very monumental moment in history. But despite this great progress, many slave owners in Alabama decided to completely disregard the law. So for 52 years, illegal slave ships were still arriving to the port of Mobile. Thankfully though, in 1860, the United States government finally decided to crack down. They successfully captured the very last slave ship to ever approach US soil. And after seizing it, they took the 110 captives and dropped them off in North Mobile. They were essentially given a plot of land called Africatown, and they were told to figure it out. This is what makes it so unique and interesting. Over the next 100 years, they basically created their own community and even spoke their own language at home. And with very little outside interaction, they built their own homes, schools, restaurants, and many businesses. Yes, it was a very poor community, but the important part is that they owned and built everything they had. And if you know anything about economics, you know that ownership is the only way to a successful community. I say that to say that the potential was there, but sadly it wouldn't be there for long. In the 1950s, the United States government introduced a controversial plan called urban renewal. Essentially, they designated certain areas as decaying and used this to seize all of the property. Obviously, this is a violation of property rights and the Constitution, but back then it wasn't seen that way. So they went to various neighborhoods across the country and pretty much bulldozed them to the ground. Whether it was the Fillmore in San Francisco, the 7th Ward in New Orleans, or Mobile, Alabama, they pretty much went to a bunch of neighborhoods and destroyed them. And by the end of the 1950s, over 75% of Africatown was completely demolished.
Damn.
The community sadly had to watch everything they built be torn to the ground. The deep history and cornerstones of the community were now replaced by endless public housing. And on top of this, they even changed the neighborhood's name from Africa Town to the Happy Hills. Like, damn, we can't even keep the name? Well, to me, urban renewal is one of the biggest stains in American history as it destroyed so many communities. It essentially turned homeowners and business owners to welfare recipients overnight, and as you would expect, the government did not take care of what they replaced it with. The residents were exposed to broken ceilings, mold, and rodent-infested apartments, and on top of this, there were no local businesses left in the area. So as you would expect, this led to some bad consequences, and Happy Hills became an extremely rough and dangerous area. Unlike LA, where the hoods have two-story homes, manicured lawns, and palm trees, this right here is the real trenches. And in this environment, there's no squabbling enemies or catching DPs, it's straight cutthroat at all times. The smallest disagreements can go straight to lethal consequences, and there's no such thing as a fair fight. It's truly a sad circumstance, but it's been the way of life in Happy Hills for quite some time. Trust me when I say that this environment is no joke, and that takes us to the early 1990s. During this period, Happy Hills had a local kingpin by the name of Honeykomb Jones. Honeykomb was known throughout Alabama as a serious hustler in the streets of Mobile. But this would not be an easy journey for him, as he was in and out of jail throughout the 90s. And with all these years in jail, he was leaving behind his bloodline, specifically a son born in 1994. This would be his son named Nashawn Jones, who's commonly known as Little Honeykomb. As you would expect, Little Honeykomb had a rough childhood coming up, with both parents in and out of prison and hopping from house to house. On top of this, he was raised in real poverty and always had to fend for himself. To many of us at home, this is beyond comprehension, but to Little Honeykomb, this was basically normal. This is because his friends, classmates, and families in the neighborhood were pretty much going through the same things. This is just the sad reality of growing up in Happy Hills. Well, now we focus entirely on the life of Nashawn Little Honeykomb Jones. Growing up, Nashawn had two best friends from the neighborhood who he rolled with every day. These would be Ladarius Moorer, also known as Stank, and Dedrick Thomas, also known as Day. According to people close to them, Honeykomb was always the leader of the group and would do. He wasn't necessarily mean or aggressive, but he loved to test people's limits. And because of this, he was constantly getting in trouble at school, and he was also arrested at a very young age. Specifically, at 10 years old, he decided to break in rooms to go and ride around with go-karts with his friends. He knocked over a bunch of items and police came to arrest him within 15 minutes. But due to his age, all police could do was take him home to his parents to be disciplined. But here's the problem. Nashawn's father had recently been sentenced to 20 years in prison, and his mother was in jail as well. So police had to take him to his aunt on his dad's side, which wasn't exactly the best environment. In fact, it may have been the worst possible place for him, so let me break it down. When Big Honeykomb went to prison, money in the family pretty much dried up. I mean, it wasn't like they were balling beforehand, but now it was really bad. So in order to put food on the table, Big Honeykomb decided to keep running his organization from behind bars. And in order for this to work, he elected certain family members to run everything for him on the streets. One of these family members would be his nephew, who he put in charge of keeping track of the money. This nephew is his sister's son, which is the family who adopted Nashawn when he went off to prison. So as you would imagine, keeping the money in the family and close to his son was the best option overall. But still though, trusting a poor teenager from the projects with thousands of dollars is always a risky move. Like, hey, I know I'm your nephew, but I gotta eat too. So it was only a matter of time before things went wrong. After just a few months, Big Honeykomb started to believe that his nephew was pocketing the money. He was pissed, feeling betrayed, and he wanted to do something about it. In his mind, even though it's his nephew, disloyalty is always unforgivable. So believe it or not, he allegedly calls up one of his goons in Mobile and tells him to put in work. Now, who is this goon, you might be wondering?
His son.
Well, this would be none other than his 13-year-old son, Nashawn Little Honeykomb Jones.
You know, Pop said running, so you gotta do it. And just do it. It's done. I really does it.
So a 13-year-old Honeykomb decides to hop off the porch for his pops, and here's how it goes. He's hanging with his friends in Happy Hills, and he somehow gets his hands on a blick. He then starts walking to his aunt's house in Plateau looking for his cousin. Because he's a leader, all his friends tag along with him with no idea what he's about to do. He then finds his cousin outside with his squad, and he decides to walk right up to him. His cousin thinks he's about to dap him up, and he has no idea what's about to go down. And in front of everyone, Honeykomb whips out and makes a wild decision. Everyone is shocked,
but
and
before the shot
Honeykomb and
is
his
so
friends
wild,
run
bruh.
back to Happy Hills. He assumes that his cousin is dead, and this is when reality kicks in. What in the world did I just do? Did I really just claim the life of my own cousin? And now that I did this, my aunt will probably be pissed, so where can I even sleep? And on top of all this, if I get arrested, I'll never see the light
You had
again.
hella witnesses, brother.
As a last resort, Honeykomb decides to make a run for it. So at 13 years old, he goes on the run, hiding from both his aunt's family and the police. We don't know the specifics, but somehow he fends for himself for months on end. Wow, this is
Trapping it
crazy,
out.
and I don't
Probably
think
had a
I've
little
seen
bitty.
anything like it. When I was 13, I was too scared to take public transportation, nonetheless survive on my own while ducking police. Oh, and I've never had my father ask me to eliminate my own cousin. So before you demonize little Honeykomb, you have to put yourself in his shoes. Like at 13 years old, you'll literally do anything for your father. On top of this, he says that he never really wanted to do it and even regrets it to this day.
Oh, yeah, he
Paralyzed
had
my
you.
own cousin, took a hit from a pop. Like, I was young then though. Like, right now, I don't know if I still do that again. Cause I still with Buzz. It was just a misunderstanding, but you know, I would have thought better about it, but I was young. Then my dad was telling me to run it. So you know, dad is telling me to run it, you know, finna run it. You know how that go.
You can even
I
see it
should've
in his
beat him.
face that he really regrets doing it.
Whoa, wait. You shot your cousin?
Yeah, yeah.
Like on accident?
Nah, like on purpose. Him and my dad, some shit with him and my dad.
It's
you
not
know,
funny, but
some
that's
money
funny.
came on missing it with my dad.
As crazy as this already is, while Honeykomb was on the run, more tragedy would strike in his family. November 1st, 2007.
Goddamn,
Little
2007.
Honeykomb happens to have an older cousin in the neighborhood named Robert Lucas, also known as Slick. Well, on this afternoon, Slick and his friends happen to be hanging out in the Josephine Allen projects like any other day. They're standing around laughing and playing music in the parking lot. The commotion pisses off one of the neighbors in the projects and she decides to call 911. She tells police that there's a group of young men hanging outside selling illicit products. So at 5 p.m. a
Were they?
Mobile sheriff named Paul Birch pulls up to the projects.
Oh, police
Slick
violence.
notices him rolling through and he decides to turn around and sprint. This is because he believes the officer is there to serve a warrant on him, but that's simply not the case. Either way, his decision to run does not serve him well. When the officer notices Slick running away, he decides to get out of his car and go chase him. He chases him through the projects, and that's when Slick trips and falls on his face.
Damn.
Because of this, the officer catches up to him and decides to draw down. Unfortunately, the situation ends in the worst way possible. Slick gets hit twice in the back, twice in the shoulder, and twice in the chest. And sadly, he wouldn't make it after being rushed to the hospital.
And no charges
Obviously, it was a
pressed.
tragic situation, but it was also controversial. The witnesses believe that Officer Paul Birch was not justified in his actions. They all rallied to get him arrested, but nothing came of it.
I told you.
This is because the officer stated that Slick pointed a blick at him while he was falling, and because of this, he had to do what he had to do to survive. The sheriff and the district attorney agreed, so they both declined to charge him. The entire Happy Hills community was pissed. To them, it was a clear case of murder and they all decided to protest. So for days on end, the community gathered together and marched the streets of Mobile. This eventually caught the attention of the FBI and the Department of Justice, so they were
I
forced
don't
to
know how you gonna switch
investigate.
while falling on his face though. That's crazy. Like,
But here we are 17 years later and no charges were ever brought to the table.
I know
And on
it.
top of this, Paul Birch is currently the elected sheriff of Mobile County.
overly
Saying new
tough.
sheriff in town. Sheriff-elect Paul
Oh,
Birch
cool.
sworn in today and is now sheriff of Mobile County. The swearing in got underway around 4 at the Crown Hall on Dolphin Street. Sheriff-elect Birch is replacing retiring Sheriff Sam Cochran.
Honeykomb would post about Slick on Facebook, and his friends are not too happy about Paul Birch. Drama, and more drama in the life of little Honeykomb Jones. After being on the run for numerous months, he finally decides to return home. Quickly though, right after his 14th birthday, he's arrested by Mobile County Sheriff.
Oh, duh, you shot your
He was
cousin.
in for some potentially serious time, but thankfully the judge was lenient and only gave him 3 years. So from ages
4
14
years.
to 17, he spent his every day and night in the Strickland Youth Center. Although it may sound miserable, for many youth offenders it's actually a very positive experience. Firstly, their living experience in the youth center may be better than it ever was growing up. But more importantly, as Charleston White explains it, it can provide structure and discipline that they've never had before.
But if you put them in any kind of institution, any kind of structured environment, structured program, they will flourish. They flourish in a structured environment.
But unfortunately, after they're done with their sentence, they're often thrown right back to the environment that got them there. And this often entails running with the same friends that they used to run with. For little Honeykomb, he was thrown right back into chaos. With both parents locked up and an aunt who hates him for paralyzing her son, you can only imagine.
So where did he live
So
at?
after being released at 17, he moved in with his grandparents in the heart of Happy Hills. And as you would expect, he went right back to hanging with his day one friends in the hood. As kids, Honeykomb was always the bad one in the group, but now that they were grown, they were all on the same timing. With young Honeykomb, Det, and Stank walking the streets, you never knew what could go down. And sometimes bad situations could occur at any time and for any reason. That takes us to December 12th, 2011. It's a chilly winter dawn and Honeykomb and Det are walking through the neighborhood with nothing to do. So at 5:45 they decide to head to the community rec center. As they're walking down Center Street, Det notices a random man standing by his car. So for whatever reason, he walks up to the man and sparks a conversation. Honeykomb thinks Det's just being friendly, but actually he has other plans on his mind. So Honeykomb stands back as Det and the man are having a conversation by his car. Then in the middle of the conversation, Det whips out a blicky and says, "Run me your pockets." The man is hesitant and is slowly fumbling around, and that's when Det runs out of patience. After hitting him once in the shoulder, he begins to run through his pockets. He then discovers that the man has nothing, so he and Honeykomb run their separate ways.
Nigga, you just shot a man for $0.00. Damn.
Thankfully, the man survives after being rushed to the hospital. And while he's recovering, police show up to ask him some questions. Who did this? What did they look like? And what were they wearing? And for whatever reason, the man gives them a simple description. It was two young teenagers from the neighborhood, and that's all I know. Believe it or not, Honeykomb's reputation was already so bad that police instantly thought it was him. So after finding his whereabouts, they instantly decided that he was a suspect. Damn, that's cold. The next day, Honeykomb's grandparents would get a knock on the door, and here we are again. Honeykomb is arrested for first-degree robbery and assault with a deadly weapon. After being taken in for questioning, police pretty much offered him an easy way out. "We know you weren't alone when this happened, so give us up who you were with and we'll let you go." Most teenagers in this situation would start squealing like Master Splinter or singing like a...
Why you so bossy snitchy? I'm dead.
Alicia Keys. But Honeykomb was already tougher than nails and realer than real, so he decided to not say a word. So as a result, the teenager was facing a long time in prison for something that he didn't do. He was willing to take it on the chin to stick to the street code and to stay loyal to his day one homie. Well, fast forward a few months and it's Honeykomb's first official court appearance on March 4th, 2012. During the hearing, the prosecutors try to get him to implicate on his friend once again, but he refuses to do so. He decides to remain solid while Det is back home hoping he doesn't squeal on him. So when Det gets word that Honeykomb stayed solid, he decides to go shoot some dice to celebrate. It's 7:30 p.m. on Selmer Street in Happy Hills. Everyone is outside on the block while Det is on the porch in a dice game. During the dice game, an OG named Anthony Jenkins gets upset. He tells Det that he owes him $5 for losing and he gets in his face. Det refuses to hand over the $5 bill, and that's when Anthony gets extra heated. He whips out a blick from his waistline and makes a terrible decision.
Oh, Det the one that died. Yeah, okay.
Yet another devastating loss for Honeykomb and the whole Happy Hills. Det was only 17 and lost his life to a 40-year-old over a $5 dice game. Oh, and here's the craziest part. Anthony was let out on a $2,500 bond,
crazy, bro.
Meaning that he posted $250 and went right back home to Happy Hills, putting not only his life but everyone else in the area's life in jeopardy as well. Man, Mobile is really something else. From questionable police
25
activity
Honda.
to judges making blatantly dangerous decisions, it all just seems like a trap. For Honeykomb, he was absolutely devastated by the news of his best friend passing. He was already facing a decade in prison, so losing his best friend only added to his problems. I mean, I can't even imagine being in a jail cell for something I didn't do and then receiving this kind of news. But on the other
My thing is, your man's literally lost his life after you take the charge for this nigga. Like, bro, if you don't value your life more than that nigga, get that nigga that $5 bill.
other hand, it did bring an interesting scenario to the table. Now that debt was gone, Honeykomb could potentially say that it was him who did the robbery. To many guys like Gangsta Williams, this is a no-brainer, but to Honeykomb, he would never go against the code of the streets. So instead, he took his lick and decided to go for a 4-year plea deal in Alabama prison. Although this may sound like a
This
good
a
deal,
different
his
nigga,
time
man.
in prison was no joke. In fact, he describes horrible conditions in the facility and even says that he could only shower once every 3 days.
You took a bath every 3 days?
Yeah, every 3 days on blood. But you know, it probably been like go a day, then skip a day. But then it be so much going on, like they might hit some in the cold and get into a fight. They won't even let her take none, you know. They'll just handle up for real. Like that's what they got going on now.
So how do you keep your hygiene up? Like, do they give you deodorant, or is there certain things you got to do to keep, you know, your body right from smelling a certain way?
Water now. I used to bathe in the sink and shit. You know, I ain't tripping. I ain't fucked up about it.
Like none of that made you like go insane at all at a period of time?
Nah, I got mad a lot of times, but only reason I was getting mad, it wasn't about me being in the cell. It was about me not taking a shower. When I really wanted to take a shower, and them would be like, nah, y'all can't take nothing today to jail on lockdown. And they be like the 3rd day.
He was willingly sustaining these horrible conditions all because he wouldn't tell on his friend. Definitely couldn't be me, but I do respect him for sticking to his code. Sadly, while he was enduring these horrible conditions, he would also lose some family members on the streets. On June 16, 2013, his cousins Tyvone and Timberly Jones would lose their life in a car accident in Happy Hills. These two are forever remembered in the neighborhood, and many people have them tatted in commemoration. But this was yet more losses for Honeykomb to deal with while sitting in a disgusting prison. But if anyone in the world could shoulder these blows, it would be Mr. Little Honeykomb Jones.
So that was part 1 of Alabama's Dumbest Demon. How are you saying that? But it's basically a Honeykomb Brazy doc. Make sure y'all like, comment, subscribe, share the video. I'll catch y'all in the next one. Stay safe, y'all.
I'm a cowboy, can't stop me, ain't to live is to conquer. All this pain got me feeling accomplished. See, this can't turn me into a monster. Hey, I'm a cowboy, can't stop me, to live is to conquer. All this pain got me feeling accomplished. See, this can't turn me into a monster. I'm a cowboy, can't stop, can't stop. Hey, all that pain got me feeling jaded. Many to roll in the making, still plugged into the mix, but lagging out before the update. Drop back in, different time, same location.